I was carrying a case of beer down to the dock when I heard my son laughing loudly with a few of the neighbors. "Keep it down. Don't let that annoying old man hear you." Then he took a sip of his beer and said, his voice dripping with mockery, "Just a few more hours. Once he goes up to bed, the real party finally starts." Craig swirled the bottle in his hand. "I'll be honest. 16 years now, and the best part of every vacation has always been the moment he disappears." And beside him my daughter-in-law laughed, easy and warm, and didn't say one word to set him straight. Something in me that I'd been holding up for 16 summers just quietly set itself down. It set itself down. This year, I didn't drive up to that lake. I didn't send a single dollar. And I swear I never expected what would happen because of it. I've turned this over 1,000 times since, so let me tell it to you the way it happened, slow, from the beginning, because it only makes sense if you understand the kind of man I'd let myself become. My name is Walt Sorenson. I'm 62 years old, and I spent 40 years with my hands inside engines. Marine engines, mostly, down on the harbor here in Duluth, Minnesota, where the ore boats come in off Lake Superior, big as buildings and just as loud. I ran a little repair shop by the water. I know diesels the way some men know scripture. Here's a thing about an engine that took me too long to apply to my own life. Nobody on a boat ever thinks about the engine. They think about the view, the weather, where they're headed. The engine just runs, down below, in the dark, doing the whole job so quietly that the people up top forget it's even there. And they go right on forgetting it, right up until the day it stops. Remember that. It's the whole story. My wife Ellen passed 16 years ago. Cancer, the kind that doesn't give you time to learn the goodbye. Our daughter was in her 20s, our son barely out of high school, and the house went so quiet after Ellen that I thought the quiet might swallow all three of us. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I kept things running. Ellen had loved the summer reunion at the lake more than any day on the calendar, so I kept the reunion. I told myself that as long as the family still came up to that lake every July, we were still a family. That was the bargain I struck in my own head. Pay for the gathering, and you get to keep the people. Nobody ever told me that isn't how any of it works. Let me show you the family the way I know them best, which is spread out on a dock in July, because that's where this family does all its real business. My son Craig sits at the center of it now. He's 40, he's done well for himself in sales, and he runs the reunion the way he runs a deal. A group text going out in May, jobs handed around, everyone told where to stand for the photo. My son can command a room. He decides who's fun and who's the problem, and somehow it's never him. His wife, Kendra, is right beside him. 38, always dressed like the picture she's about to post, and she is the one who truly runs the show, who takes the credit at the dock railing while the neighbors tell her what a beautiful thing she's put together every year. Then there's my daughter Bree. 36, works as a home health aide, hands always a little chapped from the work, the only completely honest face in the whole crowd. She wipes strangers' parents for a living and never once made me feel like a burden. And my brother, Vern, 59, blunt as a wrench, the one man in that family nobody has ever dared talk down to, and he's never once asked them to respect him. It just comes. That last night at the lake, before everything cracked, Bree set down her plate. She looked at Craig and said, "You know, Pop does more around here than anybody gives him credit for." And Kendra, not even glancing up, said, "Bree, can you grab the citronella?" And Bree got up and got the citronella. And Craig leaned back in his chair, hooked an arm over it, and looked at me like I was a spare cooler somebody left out. "Let the grown-ups run it, Pop," he said. "You just sit there and enjoy the water." The doc chuckled. I watched my daughter's jaw go tight. I said nothing. 16 summers of saying nothing has a sound, if you know how to listen for it. Across the fire, my brother Vern set down his glass. He didn't laugh. He looked straight at me, the way he's looked at me since we were kids, sharing a room with paper-thin walls. "How long," he said, low, just for me. "How long are you going to sit there and take this?" I didn't have an answer for him. Not yet. Here's what you have to understand about a man like me. I never once wanted the head of the table. I just wanted a seat somewhere along it. And here's the part that took me 16 years to see, so let me lay it out flat, because once you see a thing like this, you can't unsee it. It started small. It always starts small. A few summers back, Craig handed me the grill an hour before the pig came off and told me to watch the ribs. I'm a man who follows an instruction. I followed his exactly, and they came out dry, and by the time folks sat down, the story had already rewritten itself. Pop insisted on doing the ribs, Craig told the tables. I told him to leave it alone. He hadn't. But the crowd laughed, and I let it go. The next summer, I told a long story after dinner about a seized engine on a tug in a November gale, the kind of thing I'd spent my life doing, and Kendra checked her phone where everyone could see and said, "Okay, Pop, let people breathe." Last summer, I honestly can't tell you what I did. A wrong word, a wrong look. By the next morning, it was settled fact that I'd made things awkward again. And every single time I supposedly ruined something, there'd be a phone call the next day. Gentle, almost apologetic. "Pop, since the night got a little tense, would you mind covering the extra on the boat rental, just to smooth things over?" And I always did, because smoothing it over felt like being needed. I never once connected the two things. The blame at the fire, the bill in the morning. 16 summers of the same rhythm, and I danced to every beat of it and never once heard the music. 2 weeks before that last reunion, I sat in a doctor's office, and he put a picture of my heart up on a screen and used the word strain. "Cut back," he said. "Less lifting. Less stress." "What's eating at you, Walt?" he asked me. I didn't tell him about the group text, or the dry ribs, or the chair they always put at the end. My pension covers what I need and not a dollar more, and every July I quietly went well past what I need. I told myself it was love. Some of it was. And then at that same last dinner, light as anything, Kendra mentioned that Craig had a business thing coming up, and maybe Bree could float him a little loan. My daughter, who saves in an envelope in a drawer, they'd hit her up before, and something cold settled in my chest, right where the doctor said the strain was. If I didn't stop this now, I never would. They'd bleed me, and then her, and then whoever came next. A man has to draw a line somewhere. I just hadn't found mine yet. Here's the thing nobody ever noticed, because I was the quiet one, and people stopped watching a quiet man's hands. For years, I'd handled the boring end of that reunion. Not the fun of it, the invoices. Somewhere around the 4th or 5th summer, Kendra had said, "Pop, can you just set up the payments? You're good with that kind of thing." And I was, so I did. The lake resort that rented us the cabins, the caterer who did the pig roast, the outfit that brought the pontoon around, the man who did the fireworks off the point, the crew that cleaned the cabins after. One by one, I put every one of them on automatic payment out of my own account, because it was easier than chasing everyone for checks, and because being useful felt exactly like being loved. And what none of them ever noticed was whose name sat on those contracts. Not Craig's, not Kendra's, mine, Walt Sorenson, account holder, every line, the man the vendors called when something went sideways and never mentioned to the family because I always just took care of it. To everyone up on that dock, the reunion simply appeared every July. The cabins were booked. The pig showed up. The pontoon idled at the dock. Magic. Kendra took the credit at the railing, and I let her, because what father doesn't want to watch his family shine? I sat at my kitchen table that night and pulled up accounts I hadn't really looked at in years, vendor after vendor, autopay after autopay, all of it flowing out of one account. Mine. They thought Kendra held the keys to that whole week at the lake. They'd believed it so long it had become true in their heads. But every door to that lake opened with my key. Every single one. So that's where I was standing, 3 days later, when I came around the deck with that case of beer and heard my own son tell the neighbors it ran smoother once I was out of the way, and heard my daughter-in-law laugh. I want to be honest, because I've thought about this so many times. I wasn't angry. I keep waiting even now to feel the anger, and it never quite arrives. What I felt was clear. For the first time in years, I could see the whole engine, top to bottom, no fog. We carry the whole thing. Pop just gets underfoot. I set the beer down against the railing, quiet, and I didn't announce myself, and I walked back to my truck and drove home without the radio on. And I want to be fair to them too, because they aren't monsters, and this story's no good if I pretend they are. My son grew up watching his father come home with grease to the elbow, and a bank account that never quite stretched, and he decided somewhere young that he would never be ordinary the way he thought I was ordinary. He mistook my quiet for weakness. He mistook the fact that I never demanded anything for proof that I had nothing to demand. And Kendra came from a house that was never once stable, and that reunion was the one place on earth she got to be the woman who had it all handled. I understand them. I will never say they were right. But I understand exactly how a person ends up where they ended up, and if you can't hold those two things at once, you don't really understand people at all. That night I opened my laptop and I read every contract from the beginning, and I built the number, because numbers don't laugh at you. 16 summers of cabins and catering and boats and fireworks and the gifts I'd bought that wore other people's names. I added it all up until my eyes burned. I won't say the figure out loud, but each July came to about what a good used truck costs, and you stretch that across 16 years and you're looking at a paid-off house, or the easy retirement my doctor wished I had. I'd handed it over a slice at a time and called every slice love. Then I did the math that actually counted. In 16 years of paying, how many times had I felt like a father at that lake and not a wallet with a heartbeat? I couldn't come up with one. Not one. So I decided I wasn't going to fight anybody. No scene, no furious message. That's not who I am, and it's not how you win a thing like this anyway. I was just going to stop. This year I wouldn't go. And every payment I'd been making out of the goodness of a heart the doctor said was strained, I'd put back where it belonged. But I'd do it right. I'd warn the family. I would not leave one vendor holding an empty bag. Monday morning I made the calls, calm ones. I started with the resort. A pleasant woman named Deb answered. I'm the account holder on the July reservation, I told her. I'd like to release my cabins and cancel the automatic payment going forward. A pause, keys clicking. Mr. Sorenson, you've held this a long time. You sure? I'm sure, I said, but I don't want anyone stranded. My son Craig is the one who really runs the week. If he wants the cabins, he can book them in his own name on his own card. I'll give you his number. A longer pause. Sir, I want to make sure I've got this right. Every year it's come from you. Every year, I agreed. But not this one. This one, whoever wants the reunion signs for it themselves. I made the same call to the caterer, to the pontoon outfit, to the fireworks man, to the cleaning crew. Cancel my account. If my son wants to keep the order, he sets it up himself, his name, his card. I'm not pulling the plug on a soul. I'm just taking my name off the bottom of the page. It took less than an hour. 16 years undone over a cup of coffee at my own table. And when I hung up the last call, Deb said something that stuck with me. Sir, can I ask? Is everything all right at home? I told her it was, finally. Bree came by Tuesday after a double shift, still in her scrubs, that faint hand sanitizer smell she always carries. She stopped in the doorway and just looked at me. You're different, she said. What happened? So I told her all of it, plain. The deck. Her brother's voice. Kendra's laugh. The contracts. The calls. My daughter sat down at my table and put her face in her hands for a second, and when she looked up, her eyes were wet. Dad, I've wanted to say something for years, she said. And every single time she cut me off before I got 2 words out. I should have fought harder for you. You were one voice against a whole dock, I told her. That's a hard place to stand. It's not right what they did. What Craig did. She shook her head. But he's your son. He is, I said, and I helped make him this way. I paid for every problem until they all stopped looking like problems to him. That's on me too. So what do you need, Dad? She said. Nothing loud, I told her. I don't need you to fight anybody. I'm done fighting. I just need you to tell the truth if anyone ever asks you straight. She held my eyes a long moment, then nodded once, the way her grandfather used to. If they ask me straight, she said, I'll tell them exactly what I've seen. And there was something in how she said it, like she'd been carrying a weight of her own, waiting for the right day to put it down. Kendra called Wednesday, bright and breezy, the way she always opened. Hi Pop, so, couple things. The resort needs the head count and the caterer wants a deposit confirmed. Can you handle both, like usual? There it was, like usual. No, I said. Not this year. A small laugh, she thought she'd misheard. What do you mean, no, it's 2 phone calls. I mean I won't be coming up this year, Kendra. And I've reorganized my own expenses. Going forward, the people hosting the reunion will be the ones paying for it. The line went quiet. I could hear her breathing change. Your expenses, she said. Pop, what expenses? The cabins, I said gently. The pig, the boat, the fireworks. All of it. 16 years, out of my account. I've released it. If you want the week, you'll book it yourself, in your name, on your card. Her voice climbed. Do you have any idea how this looks? You want to ruin the reunion for the grandkids? I don't want anyone miserable. I said, level, the way you talk on the harbor when somebody's panicking and you're not. I want to stop paying for a week I'm only ever welcome to fund. I told her good night, and I meant it kindly, and then I set the phone face up on the counter and watched it light up over and over in the dark. By Thursday she'd called in the cavalry. Cousins I hadn't heard from since last summer. An in-law on Ellen's side. A family friend just checking in. Every message wore the same coat. We're worried about you, Walt. This isn't like you. Kendra's beside herself. Don't let pride wreck the summer. Think of the grandkids. One cousin came right out with the word, selfish. And I sat in my chair and read them all, and the old guilt started up my spine, because 16 years of it knows exactly where a man lives. For about an hour I nearly folded. I'm not too proud to admit it. Just pay it, Walt. Keep the peace. It's only money. That was the very voice that had cost me 16 summers, soft and reasonable, wearing the face of love. My thumb actually drifted toward Craig's name. Then a text came in from Vern. I know what's happening. I've watched it for years and bit my tongue. Don't you dare fold now, Walt. Ellen would have done this a decade ago. I'm with you, all the way down. I read it twice. My brother doesn't waste words. I set the phone in my lap, and my hands were shaking a little, and I'm a steady man. I didn't answer the cousins. I didn't call anybody. I just let the phone ring itself out in the quiet of the house I'd kept warm for everyone but me. Craig didn't call. Craig showed up. Friday night, his headlights in my drive, his fist on my door heavier than it needed to be. You're embarrassing this family, he said, standing in my living room like he was pricing it. Kendra's a wreck. The resort's calling her like she's a deadbeat. You think this makes you strong? It makes you look bitter. I let him run. You made a commitment, he went on. Same deal every year. You don't yank it out from under everybody because your feelings got bruised. What commitment did I make, Craig? I said. That stopped him half a second. You always pay. Everybody knows that. Everybody assumed that, I said. That's a different thing. The contracts have names on them. Whoever's name is on it pays it. You just never had to read them. This is a disgrace, he said, stepping closer, looming the way big men do. Kendra carries this whole family. Then she can carry the reunion, I said, quiet. He stared at me like the furniture had talked back. I walked to the door and opened it, and the cool night came in off the lake, and I said, Good night, Craig, drive safe. And he left. He had to. There's nothing left to say to a man who's finally run out of yes. I wasn't there for the next part. Bree was, and she told me after, so I'll tell it the way she told me. Kendra went down to the resort to rebook in her own name, sure it'd take 5 minutes. Deb sat her down and slid a fresh contract across the desk with a printed quote. Since you're booking it yourself this year, ma'am, here's what the week runs, Deb said gently. Cabins, catering, the boat, the whole thing, and we'll need a card and a deposit to hold it. And she turned the quote around. Bree said she watched her sister-in-law's face do something she'd never seen it do. The color left it. Her eyes went down the page, line by line, numbers she had never once in her life had to look at. And then Deb, trying to help, pulled up the history on her screen. You've been with us a long while as a family, she said. Same week every July, always under the one name, looks like. And Kendra leaned in, and there it was, year on year, paid in full. Walt Sorenson. Walt Sorenson. Walt Sorenson. She just sat there, Dad, Bree said, staring at that screen like the dock had tipped. She asked Deb, real quiet, he paid for all of this, every year? And Deb said, Yes, ma'am, always has. And then, because this family only ever knows one move, Kendra called Bree that same night and asked her to float the balance, just till fall. My daughter put it on speaker so I could hear, sitting right across from me. How much? Bree asked. Kendra named a number, a big one for a woman who saves in a drawer. No, Bree said. And there was a silence, and then, after everything I do, and Bree's voice stayed even, but I heard the years in it. After you told the whole doc I was the daughter who never amounted to much? After you called Dad a sad old man who buys his way in? A pause. I never said that. You texted it to me, Kendra, Bree said, 2 summers ago. I've still got it, and here's where my daughter surprised me. Delete it, Kendra said. Smaller now. No, Bree said. I'm not going to use it against you. That's not how Dad does things, and it's not how I do things. I just wanted you to know I remember. And I'm deleting it after this call, because I don't want to carry it anymore." And she hung up and deleted it right there at my table and looked at me almost apologetic. "We don't win this by throwing her own words back, Dad," she said. "We win it by being the people she said we weren't." I told her I understood. I understood completely. Let me step out of the story for a second, because I've got a feeling some of you are sitting exactly where I was. Maybe you're the one who quietly kept your family running. The one who paid, who fixed, who smoothed it over, and got treated like it was nothing. If that's you, tell me in the comments where you finally drew your line, because I read them, and I mean that. Now let me take you to the day it all came due. The last days before the reunion were the loudest quiet of my life. I let the calls ring. It wasn't cruelty. I'd said my piece, clear and kind, and there was nothing left to negotiate. So I did what I hadn't done in 16 summers. I took care of my own house. I cleaned it up. I pulled the tarp off the little fishing boat Ellen and I bought our first year married, the one I never had time to run because I was too busy funding everybody else's July, and I got the engine turning sweet again. I bought food for two, because it was going to be me and Bree. Vern called once and I answered. "They're going ahead with the whole thing," he told me. "Kendra booked it herself. She's betting you'll cave and drive up and settle it on the day, quiet, like you have for 16 years. She staked the whole night on it." "Not this year," I said. And Vern was quiet a second and then said, "Ellen would have done it 20 years sooner, little brother." That one got me. The day of the reunion, I drove up to that lake with no wallet in my pocket. I want you to know I left it on the kitchen counter on purpose. For once, I was bringing nothing but myself. And I want to slow all the way down here, because this is the part I've walked through 100 times. The resort grounds looked the way July always looked. Long gold light off the water, kids on the dock, the pontoon tied up, smoke off the pig cooker, and a crowd of family and lake neighbors milling around in the warm evening like nothing on earth was wrong. I parked. I walked across the grass toward the light and the noise, and the crowd turned. It is a strange thing to walk into a gathering your money built, where you've been the joke at the end of the table for 16 years, and feel the whole thing go quiet because you showed up. The music kept going, the people did not. Kendra was near the cooker, and she was not put together anymore. She was pale, and Deb from the office stood beside her with an open folder, and the family from the next cabin over, the Bishops, stood close enough to have heard every word. Kendra saw me and something flickered across her face, relief almost, like the cavalry had finally come, like Pop always comes. "Dad," she said, pitched for the whole crowd. "Thank God. Tell them there's been a misunderstanding. Tell them we'll get it sorted." I stood there in the grass, and I looked at her, and I said, "There's no misunderstanding. Quiet. Not loud." The crowd leaned in to hear me anyway. "Dad, you're doing it again," she said, sharpening, reaching for the old script in front of the old audience. "You're ruining the reunion. You always ruin it." And there it was. 16 years of it, said out loud in front of everyone. I didn't raise my voice. "You rarely need to." "I didn't ruin anything," I said. "I just stopped paying for a party I was never really invited to. And the whole place went so still you could hear the water against the dock. And then, from behind me, a voice. It was Deb. She wasn't trying to make a scene. She was trying to do her job, and she was confused, and confusion makes people honest. "I'm sorry," she said, looking between me and Kendra. "I just need someone to settle tonight's balance." And then she added the thing that turned the whole crowd. I told Mrs. Sorenson, when she booked, it's the first time in all these years it hasn't been under her father-in-law's name. Every summer before this one, Mr. Sorenson paid for the whole week himself, the cabins, the catering, all of it. The crowd did the math out loud in a dozen quiet faces at once, and I watched it move across them. The Bishops, who'd heard my son brag that I just got underfoot. The cousins who'd texted me the word selfish. The family friends who'd spent 16 summers telling Kendra what a lovely thing she'd put together. Every one of them turning, slow, to look at the empty camp chair at the end of the dock, the one they always set out for me, near the path, and then turning to look at me. I didn't say a thing. This was the kind of moment that ruins itself if you talk over it. It was Craig's face I watched. He'd been wearing that loose, in-charge look since I walked up. I saw it go. Saw it slide right off him, as he understood that the very neighbors he'd performed for had just learned exactly who'd been carrying the thing he took the credit for. He looked at the Bishops. The Bishops looked at the grass. Then my daughter stepped out of the crowd. I want to say something, since we're all here, Bree said, and she didn't raise her voice either. She learned that from me, I suppose. For years, she said, every summer, the story was the same. Pop ruined it, Pop got underfoot. But nobody ever mentioned that the man who supposedly ruined it was the only reason any of us had a reunion at all. He paid for every bit of it, and we sat him at the end and called him the problem. A few people looked at their shoes. And then Vern stepped up beside her. My brother? The one man nobody dared wave off. I've watched this 16 years, he said, and his voice carried without trying, and I held my tongue because it wasn't my house, and they weren't my kids, and that was my mistake. He looked right at Kendra, and at Craig. Your father isn't the man who ruins the reunion. He's the man who's quietly given you one every single year while you let people laugh at him for it. And for the first time in 16 years, nobody in that crowd jumped in to smooth it over. No chuckle. No, okay, Pop. Nobody touched an arm and steered the moment somewhere kinder. The silence belonged to them now. All of it. And then I spoke, because some things a father should say himself. I'm not here to embarrass anybody, I said. That's not why I came. I loved doing this, in the beginning. After Ellen passed, keeping this reunion going was how I held us together. But somewhere along the way, I started believing the only way to keep my family was to pay for them. And once you believe that, people will let you. I'm 62. My heart's not what it was. And I'm done buying a seat at a table where I'm treated like I don't belong. I turned to my son. Not cruel, just done. I'm not angry with you, Craig, but I'm finished being the joke at the end of the dock. So here's how it goes now. Whoever hosts pays. That's only fair. And me, I'll still come, if I'm wanted. As a father, not as a checkbook. And I turned and walked back across the grass toward my truck, and the light was still gold on the water, and not one person reached for my arm to keep the peace the way they always had. And walking out into that warm evening, lighter than I'd felt in 16 years, I understood something. For once, I'd kept the reunion by leaving it. The party didn't recover. Bree said folks drifted off within the hour, the way they do when the air's gone out of a room. Kendra settled what she could, and put the rest on a plan. Deb set up part on a card, the balance over 2 months, the full freight of one reunion landing on the woman who'd taken credit for 16. I won't pretend I felt nothing hearing that, not triumph. Closer to grief. It's a hard thing to watch your kids finally feel the weight you'd been carrying for them. The story moved around the lake the way stories do, and by August it wasn't Walt ruined the reunion. It was, did you hear what they let that man's family do to him? The bishops mailed me a card, an actual card, and inside in careful hand it said, we're sorry for what we assumed. You always seemed like a good man. Now we know why. Craig went quiet. The thing about a man who lives on the impression he makes is that the neighbors he performed for were the same people he hoped would think well of him for years, and he spent all of it in one careless sentence on a deck. And Craig and Kendra strained, the way a thing built on somebody else's wallet strains the second the wallet closes, each of them reaching for the other to hold the blame. By fall, they were living apart, figuring out whatever they were going to figure out. I didn't celebrate it. Watching my son's marriage crack was never a prize I wanted, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel the ground shift. For 16 years, I'd been the glue in a thing that maybe shouldn't have been held together. Now the glue was gone, and everyone was finding out what was actually load-bearing. It wasn't me. It never had been. 2 days after, Craig came by alone, which told me something. He sat at my table, tired, no swagger left. I saw the numbers, Dad, he said. I never knew. I never sat down and looked. I know, I said. I made it easy not to. He turned a coffee cup in his hands. I don't know how to do this, he admitted, and his voice broke a little. The reunion, the money, any of it. You always handled it. And I felt it then. Not vindication, just the plain, sad truth. I'd done this. Not the cruelty, that was his, but the helplessness. I'd paid for everything so long my own son never learned to stand. You'll learn, I told him. It's not too late. And after he left, the old reasonable voice came right back up. He's struggling, Walt. He came to you. Just help him this once. Cover the balance. You've got it. What's it for if not your kids? And I actually got as far as opening the banking app, thumb over the screen, 3 taps from being the hero of the morning after. And that's exactly what scared me. Because that voice was never love. It was the same hook that held me 16 years. Help once and you're back on the line. My phone buzzed. Bree, don't do it, Dad. And a second later, Vern. If Craig asks for money, the answer's the same as last week. I set the phone down and closed the app without doing a thing. It turns out the hardest part wasn't standing up to my son at the door or walking into that reunion with empty pockets. The hardest part was sitting alone in my kitchen and not rescuing my own boy from a lesson he needed to learn. The next summer looked nothing like the 16 before it. No rented cabins, no caterer, no pontoon, no fireworks off the point. Just my place by the harbor, the one I'd kept warm for everyone else all those years, finally warm for me. I hosted small. I ran that little fishing boat myself and grilled what we caught. Bree brought a kind man who asked me about the oar boats like it mattered. Vern came early and stayed late and bossed me around my own kitchen, which felt exactly right. And Craig came, with his kids and empty hands and no group text, quieter than I'd ever seen him, asking if he could help carry the coolers. Things weren't fixed. You don't undo 16 years over one afternoon. But he'd thrown a little birthday for his youngest that spring and paid for it himself, and he'd called to tell me, proud as a kid, and I'd been proud right back. Late that day, with the grandkids worn out on the couch, Craig found me down by the water. I owe you more than I know how to say, he said. I'm not going to try to say all of it tonight. I'd get it wrong. You don't have to, I told him. I do, though, just one part. Thank you, Dad. All those years I never once said it. I never even saw you. His voice went thin. I'm sorry it took losing it to see you. And there was no favor riding behind it. No ask. Just my son, 16 years late, meaning it. I forgive you, I said. Because I did. Not because he'd earned it with a perfect apology, but because carrying it was heavier than setting it down, and I was done carrying things that weren't mine. I put my arm around my son by the water, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't cost me a dime, and it was worth more than every check I ever wrote. Here's what I learned, and I'll give it to you plain, the way I wish somebody had given it to me at 40. You cannot buy your way into a person's respect. You can only buy your way into being used. Nobody thinks about the engine until it stops. And the day I finally went quiet, my family found out what was actually keeping the whole thing afloat. And it wasn't the man they'd been laughing at. The day I stopped paying was the day I started belonging. Self-worth isn't something you purchase for other people. It's something you finally decide you're allowed to keep. So here's the one thing I'd ask you to do this week, if any of this landed. If you're the one quietly holding your family up, stop, just once, and let them feel the weight, and watch who reaches to help carry it, and who only reaches to hand it back. And here's the question I want you to sit with tonight. If you went quiet tomorrow, who in your life would suddenly notice everything you've been carrying, and who would just wonder where their next favor went? I'd truly like to know how you see it, so before you go, tell me in the comments. Comment 1 if you think I was right to stop and stay home. Comment 2 if you think I should have sat them down and said it years ago instead of just quietly paying. Or comment 3 if you think I should have kept paying to keep the peace, for the grandkids' sake. There's no wrong answer, and I read every one. And tell me where in the world you're listening from, and what time it is where you are right now, because it always amazes me how far these stories travel. And if you've ever been the one who carried a family in silence and got treated like it was nothing, I'd be honored if you'd share a little of it, so the next person scrolling by knows they aren't the only one who ever set the coolers down and drove home without the radio on. If this story meant something to you, the kindest thing you can do is subscribe and stick around, because there's a whole life's worth of these where it came from, and it costs you nothing, and it means the world to an old man with a boat and a quiet house and a story to tell. Thank you for sitting with me, truly. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Duluth to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.